I'm John Barnes. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at William Reed, and I look after the Digital Collective at the PPA. And I've helped curate this stage with Mel McVie, who looked after it this morning. I have to be honest and say she's done a bit more of the curation than I have, to be totally fair. I hope you had a great time over lunch and managed to get something. Don't forget we've got a Slido in here. I think there might be a QR code going up on screen later on. Just simply use your camera, you know how it works. You don't have to put your name. It helps sometimes if you do have a name because it gives some context, but don't feel pressurized to do that. And we'll come on to your questions towards the end of the session. What's kind of interesting about this particular session is it really is at the heart and soul of the Enders report that you, hopefully if you're at the keynote this morning, you would have seen what that was all about. So this whole issue about being everything, everywhere, having multi-formats and the challenges that sort of creates. I'm particularly interested in this because it's a challenge we have. And if any of you were in the product stage just before lunch and saw the Bauer session, they were talking about something called liquid content, and sort of reformatting a format to another format isn't actually what it's about. It's trying to reimagine the content, which I'm sure these speakers are going to sort of run through. So I'm very lucky to have three people who have interesting perspectives on this. Immediately to my left, it is Olivia Midgley, who's the Editorial Director of Farmers Guardian. I would say our B2B kind of representative here. Next to her is Darren Styles, who is the CEO of Stream Publishing, but you might be more familiar with Rolling Stone magazine and Attitude, which they're two publications. So I would say you're the B2C guy or B2C person. And then we're delighted to have over the far side Andrew Craissati, who's the founder and CEO of Auddy. I have to say on the discovery call, Auddy was very new to me. And I think the best way to describe Auddy is that you're a platform and a content distributor at the same time for your clients' content. And they're generally celebrities and people in the public eye. Okay. And it's a closed environment, and it's generally paid. So I think we're going to end with Andrew, because I think that will tee us up nicely for some of the challenges. So what I'm going to start with is, Olivia, we're going to then move on to Darren, and then finally Andrew. Just 5 minutes or so, just describing what you're doing at Farmers Guardian and what some of the challenges are, particularly in relation to this multi-format reality, that problem that we want to explore today.
Yeah, thanks, John, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. So I am Editorial Director, as John says, of Farmers Guardian, which is a 182-year-old publication. And in terms of being everything, everywhere, all at once, we have a weekly print product, a very vibrant weekly magazine that comes out every Friday, and then a serious plethora of multi-platform content. It's not as chaotic as it was 3 years ago. So we commenced our digital transformation journey, started it then. I'm not going to say that we're perfect, but we have made a lot of gains on the way. It's underpinned by two things. So we are predominantly a farming audience. So we have a very loyal farming audience. We are a real trusted brand in agriculture. We've been around for over 180 years, so that trust sees us through quite a long way. We also have tremendous credibility with our incredible team of journalists, many of whom are from farming families themselves. And in farming, it's all about not really about how many acres you farm or how many hectares you've got at home. It's actually how long you've been in the industry, how many generations do you go back. So we've got a really firm footing. What we've tried to do over the last 3 years is really take that really vibrant print product and those fantastic digital assets that we're good at creating, all underpinned by brilliant content. But then how can we increase membership? And everything really comes down to, how do we drive people back to membership?
And so you're a paid model?
Yes, we are, yeah. So if a format can't answer that question, then we will really scrutinise it.
A membership sometimes it can be another word for subscriptions, but you do really mean membership, don't you?
Yeah, I think it's, I've written down here, a subscriber pays, but a member belongs. And I think what's really important at Farmers Guardian is that we really do scrutinise that model. So we will survey farmers quite regularly. That audience intelligence piece is absolutely key. And, we listen, we have to. It's a small industry. There are a lot of farmers in the UK, but it is quite a small, unique industry. And they like to talk to us, and we like to.
So you've got all the ingredients,
yes,
by the sounds of it. Darren, very fascinated to hear what you got to say as the proprietor of Rolling Stone, one of my favourite publications.
Yes, I mean, well, I'll start with attitude first, and then talk a bit about Rolling Stone, because actually it's two quite different models. And I think there's a slide, if we can put up. Do I press the button for that?
Yeah.
If I press that, does that?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that! It's magic. So I bought Attitude magazine in 2015, having been a lifetime reader pretty well. And at that point, it was a moribund print magazine and a website that would work 4 days in every 7, but never the same 4 days, just to make life interesting. And so it needed to transform quite dramatically. But what it has is a really significant and loyal readership. And so what we worked really hard on doing for the longest time was, rather than rushing off to digitise everything, find out where those readers are and where and how they engage, and then try to be present in those spaces rather than trying to rush off and find new ones in the chase for growth. And so now, 10 years later, in much the same way as Olivia was saying, I don't think we get everything right, but I think we have a rationale and we've executed that. The print magazine still exists. We do 6 of those a year, and then in the fallow months, as we call them, we produce a digital edition called Attitude Uncut, which is a bit racier. You can only access that through Apple News Plus or on our own app, so that's behind a paywall, so that's 2 sets of subscribing paying customers. We then have a website that now stands every day, I'm delighted to say, and then a series of social channels that come off of that, but 6 very carefully chosen social channels, because we know who our readers are. They tend to be older, more affluent, and so we're not on Snapchat, for example, but we are big into Instagram, huge on Facebook because we were there very early, and then latterly on YouTube, more so than TikTok.
Right.
And then we've built a series of live events out of the brand as well. And if I'm absolutely honest, that's the cement between the bricks. Yeah. That's where the partnerships are formed, where we generate our own news rather than reporting everybody else's news out of that event. And they have become seismic. The Attitude Awards in particular, which is every October, had 500 million third-party media reach last year. So it's become an absolute symbol of all that we are. And then latterly, podcasting is something we're very interested in, but we would stop go. Where do we go, and how do we feel our way through? So what we've actually started doing is now working with a series of established podcasts to amplify them and co-brand with them. And so the first of those is the brilliant lesbian comedian Susie Ruffle has done more than 100 episodes of Out with Susie Ruffle. So now we've co-branded with her as Attitude Presents Out with Susie Ruffle, and we're amplifying that now in video for the first time rather than just audio, and bringing in sponsors and partners and so on. And so that's been 10 years in the making on all of those platforms. And then my lockdown project, as you said, was to license Rolling Stone in the UK, which has been around since the 1960s. Q magazine obviously went completely, NME went out of print, and so we thought there was an opportunity to take the model that we developed for Attitude and use that to bring Rolling Stone here. And that's been 5 years rather than 10, so it's not yet everywhere we want it to be. But we have an annual Rolling Stone Awards now, hosted by the lovely Danny Dyer at the end of last year. Again, 6 issues in print, special digital editions when big bands and albums and concerts are out, and across multiple social channels. But they're very big into Instagram and TikTok because that's where music consumers are in the main.
And mostly paid content?
Yes. So if you want Rolling Stone magazine, you've got to buy it. If you want the app and the digital edition, you've got to buy that. But then edited versions of those stories appearing across social media to drive people back to the website
the engagement
and through the gateway.
Kind of yeah. Okay, fantastic. Andrew.
Thank you, JB. It's lovely to be here, and I really appreciate being invited. Auddy is an end-to-end provider of business-to-business services in the audio world. So our principal focus is audio. We work with video as well. Our clients are across 3 different continents, as are our employees. And we distill our services down into 3 areas of activity. We are a creative services agency. So our clients are commissioning us to conceptualize, create, produce, record, publish their audio and video podcasts, or vodcasts, if you want to call them that. We monetize the content for them. So we are a substantial independent media buyer in the podcast industry, which means effectively we're representing advertisers, particularly in the UK, the US, and Germany. And we are buying media inventory on probably the top 5% performing podcasts in Europe. And then lastly, we control the distribution of the content for our clients. So that, in our language, means you have 2 strategies available to you. One is public, one is private. So a publicly distributed podcast means you're distributing onto Apple, Spotify, and the various other podcast platforms that exist around the world. That has severe limitations on what you can do with those platforms. The 2 most significant challenges you face are they provide almost no data as to what happens to your content when it's residing there. And secondarily, you can't control the access to the content itself. So if, for example, you're trying to create content that is for your subscriber base, or in our case, some of our clients are using this for internal communications or shareholder relations or other purposes, you can't control at all who has access to the content. So we invented and built Campfire, which is the world's first private podcast distribution platform. It's encrypted, it is private, it is by invitation only, and it comes with a complete set of analytically drawn insights as to what each individual user is doing with the content that you make available through it. So through those 3 combined services, we are a one-stop shop for anybody who's thinking about an audio-first strategy for their content.
Fantastic. And you don't produce content yourself, but you clearly advise clients on formats and the kind of content to produce that will be engaging.
We do produce. We produce for our clients. They hire us to produce.
So it's kind of like a content studio or something.
Yes, and for many of them, they either don't have the resources or the prior experience with audio.
Yeah.
So we are often asked to effectively project manage the undertaking from beginning to end.
And is it, with clients, I imagine the kind of clients you have, quite demanding, quite sure of themselves. Do you sometimes have difficult conversations about the right kind of formats and platforms to pursue or not?
I don't think it's difficult, but it's definitely a conversation.
Yeah.
A lot of our clients know they want to be in our sector,
Yeah.
but they don't necessarily know how to or what all of the precise details should be, particularly around the editorial or creative strategy.
Right.
So that, to us, feels a very, very collaborative process.
Yeah.
They understand their brand, they understand their audience, we understand our medium, and so as long as we can be collaborative with them, it works very well.
Fantastic. I'd like to come back to you later on, because I particularly want to explore this idea about owning the audience relationship rather than a reliance on platforms. So I think you'll have a very interesting perspective on that. But before we get to that, I think it's the kind of big question, I think, for a lot of publishers, maybe particularly B2B publishers, I'm a B2B publisher, is what are the best content formats to invest in and what are the best ones to ignore? And I'd maybe kick off with you, Olivia, and I believe, Jeremy, you did some experiments with different kinds of engagement with different kind of products, and some you did cut. So I'm then interested with you about how you make hard choices about what to lose and what to focus on. So if we start with Olivia.
Yeah, this is the thing, isn't it, John? So being everything everywhere and what's right, what's not, how do you scrutinise those different models? And it is really difficult because you do, as a journalist, we want to do everything.
Yeah.
And that is chaotic, and I think that is spreading the team far too thin. So over the last 3 years, we've really tried to knuckle down on this and really measure. And there's a really well-used saying in farming, it's, if you don't measure, you can't manage.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely crucial. So, the weekly podcast is free to listen to. We cover a broad range of
and is
topics
podcast
on it.
audio and video? Is that the trend?
It is.
Okay.
And that's something that we changed, I think, about 6 months ago, because we have 22,500 subscribers on YouTube. It's a fairly engaged audience, so we have a weekly podcast. Why wouldn't we film it? And why wouldn't we? You've got one piece of video content easy every week that you've got. That's then driven us down the YouTube Shorts route, which is performing really well. So we've got a YouTube short that goes out every single day around lunchtime. So that's something that's very new. We've got puzzles. We've got everything, but everything is about pushing people back to the website and data, and that point about as soon as you put your email address in, and we can ask you what size your farm is, what you farm, you might be beef, you might be arable, you might do a bit of everything. As soon as we've got that, then we can start really personalising that content, and that's just been key to our success, I think, over the last 18 months.
And do you, sounding ignorant about farmers, but they're always out and about. They often have poor connections, maybe. That's a old-fashioned view about
Some
the countryside.
do, yeah, but they're always on the phones.
They're always on their phone. So does device and sort of speed and those things, does that become very important?
Yeah, I think
what you're doing?
it's absolutely being something it has to be front and centre when you're delivering content for farmers. It has to be. I think, you've got a real disparity between the most high-tech, well-connected farmers who are driving tractors via satellite to guys in Wales who literally can't get a phone signal. That is now, I'm glad to say, connectivity is an issue, but it's not as bad as it was. But yeah, we need to get the information to them, don't we? So it's definitely something that you've got to think about. I think the YouTube Shorts is quite interesting, and the growth of that is that farmers do take a lunch break. They might be on the tractor in the cab, but they'll be on the phone, and they won't watch a long-form video at lunchtime, but they will after 6 o'clock, because they usually go in, they have their tea, and they'll sit and they'll watch a longer video then.
So you've also got issues about time of the day as another area to explore.
Yeah.
So Jeremy, moving on to you, that this concept of what to choose and what to cut, products are not living animals or things, you can kill them. But it's a difficult choice sometimes. So how do you go about that?
Well, it's stabilised a bit now, but there was a Wild West period, wasn't there, where literally every couple of months there was a new app, and we were absolutely trying to be everywhere at once. But if you go back to the core reader and you understand your brand and your brand positioning, once those new channels start to get a foothold, you can then start to get a read on who's using those channels. TikTok for the longest time was 12-year-old Japanese schoolgirls, and so there was no point us putting anything there that was attitude branding, because it just wasn't getting the traction. Snapchat too. Tilt's very young, and although one of our rival platforms was making a lot of money there very quickly, it was all Daily Mail clickbaity type stories, and that wasn't our brand. Our brand is long reads, our brand is premium brands, and so it just really wasn't working for us. Instagram, though, as a visual medium, and with short, sharp video targeted and reading slightly older, absolutely did work for us, and so we went very, very quickly through the 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, now 400,000 followers. And initially, not being able to link out and back to the stories meant it was of limited value, but it was the right area for us. So Snapchat, we tried and left. TikTok, we do use now a little bit as that platform has developed, but actually it's YouTube and the number of subscribers that we have on YouTube and that content which you can monetize that we've focused on. So our two big pushes now are on Apple News Plus,
Right.
which returns us really good money
Yeah.
because it's behind a paywall and rewards long reads as opposed to 300 words and something scandalous, but genuine original content from the heart for our readers. And then the same on YouTube. So if you get something that catches on there, we just put a short film that was Oscar nominated on YouTube just for 3 weeks ahead of the Oscars, starring Miriam Margolyes and Stephen Fry, called Friend of Dorothy, and 591,000 people watched that 21-minute film in 3 weeks on our YouTube channel.
That's
and
really
so the focus, the absolute focus there is knowing where your readers are and then how to monetize that. And if we can't monetize it, and if it's not driving us traffic to our website, then we tend to let it
So with brands like yours, as you said, Attitude, well established, quite an affluent audience, both has print and digital and all of these other channels. Rolling Stone, clearly a music title historically, although I'm sure it covers other arts.
Music, TV and entertainment and films. Yeah.
But both of them, you know the audience you've currently got and the audience you need to have in the future aren't yet affluent or slightly older. So what keeps you up at night about the right formats for those people, and what are you doing to experiment with?
Well, we are always, so Reddit, for example, we're looking at that really hard at the minute, because for the longest time, anybody promoting their content, their actual genuine content on Reddit was kicked straight off because it wasn't about that.
Yeah.
They're now starting to experiment with allowing publishers who are putting bona fide, genuine first rights content out. They're experimenting with allowing them onto the platform. So that's really interesting to me, and because that has a potentially vast audience of people who read, and we're producing bona fide new content. So particularly for Rolling Stone, that's interesting because you get fandoms based around brands or TV franchises who will go in search of a group that's talking about that. So if we can get into that and crack that, that's an interesting opportunity. But we're always watching and always listening.
So if we could move on to platforms, there's been a couple of conversations about owning the audience, owning the data. I mean, I'm kind of interested in two things really. What are you losing if your audience is sitting on a platform like YouTube in terms of what you might get in terms of data or knowledge or information? That's one question. Then the other question is, I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I'd still like to hear the answer, is how important is it for you to own, as a publisher, to own your audience relationship versus relying on platforms? And why would a closed invite-only platform be an interesting thing for a humble B2B publisher to explore?
Well, let's start with the first question. Great question. The moment your future customer or your existing customer or subscriber, however you want to describe them, sits on another platform, in my mind, you've lost them.
Yeah.
They're now having a completely different branded experience. They're no longer talking to your brand. They're no longer having a relationship with you. You're potentially losing some revenue that you don't need to lose. And most importantly, in this new world of first-party data, you want to be collecting that data, not having Patreon or Substack or some other platform collect it, and maybe at their discretion give you a small percentage of it. Mm-hmm. So it actually serves you very, very little value. And Substack is a good example. It is most decidedly not there to serve your best interests. No. It is there to serve its own best interests. In terms of being on a more proprietary platform, my view actually comes out of my background. I'm an alumni of the Virgin Group, where I spent my life just thinking about the consumer experience.
Yes.
And the consumer wants to go on a journey with you, with your brand, within your ecosystem. So when we were building Campfire, to me, one of the most important features was, could we in fact build a piece of technology that is a distribution mechanism that actually sits inside our client's ecosystem? So rather than sending someone over to somewhere else, you're keeping them on your platform. Could be as simple as an added page on your website. And now you've got your simple Google Analytics telling you about all the traffic on your website. But in addition, you've now got, in our case, the Campfire solution embedded into your website that is telling you everything about what they do with the content. So now you're a very well-informed client, and you are understanding how to modify your content strategy and turn it into revenue.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Okay, and then following on from that, I mean, the concept of moving away from obviously websites onto other devices and other kinds of applications. Are apps an interesting way to go? Publisher-developed apps and own apps, or is it better, particularly with podcasts, in your mind, to be going through the big, well-established channels where you've got reach? So it's sort of ownership over reach, I guess, is the kind of the balance, the question.
We offer our clients both solutions. So they can create content and distribute it through a proprietary app that is our app, but it's branded with the client's identity, or it can simply be an online experience through a web page.
Yeah.
I would say probably 10 to 20% of our clients use the app.
Okay.
Most don't. And most of that thinking is driven by their belief that apps create friction with the end user.
Okay.
There's
another
a hurdle you have to overcome in downloading an app.
Okay, that's.
Can I just momentarily offer what I think President Trump would call an alternate truth? Because I think both of them can be true. To use a really old-fashioned analogy, which shows you how long I've been in publishing, there was a time where there were two income streams: advertising revenue and copy sales, and that was that. And the way to build copy sales was to be in as many shop windows, as many newsagents as you could possibly be, given the money you had to spend and the scale of the audience you were reaching. And while it's absolutely true, you don't own everybody on every platform, the modern day iteration of that is I want my brand to be in as many shop windows as possible, to have a relationship with me wherever they are, in order that I can drive them back to my platforms where I can
sell
to them, own them and control them.
Angle.
It's exactly that. In some instance, your content is your marketing budget, and where you're putting it to promote it, and then encouraging people to come back and talk to you. So it's definitely true. I don't own my subscribers on YouTube in the same way as I do on my app, or if they subscribe to the magazine or download the digital version. But I think all of those things can be true, because they're useful in terms of marketing your brand and the content you produce, I think.
It's also worth saying, it's not one size fits all.
No.
So different industries have different priorities. We have clients in many different industries, and they have extremely diverse strategies that work very well.
So the question, one of the questions I sort of thought about when we were discussing this earlier, is this the balance between how much effort goes into marketing versus how much effort goes into creation? And is the answer it should be equal, or what would the view be? Maybe start with Olivia.
Yeah, I think just on that point as well, that it's a really important part of the strategy to go to where people are, because, even in our very niche sector of agriculture, there's huge segmentation, and you have to be where the people are, right? One thing as well, we have, we're at a lot of events, we still get out and about quite a lot. There's a lot of agricultural shows and various different events, and we run various events as well. And I think that events are a really underrated distribution channel. So the last couple of years, we've really intensified our, so we'll do Q&As, we'll do filmed podcasts on our stand. Yep. We did a really cool hot mic session at our Llama, it's the UK's major machinery show held at the NEC in January. And we got some really high profile speakers, politicians, and kind of got people, crowded around the stand and created that buzz. Yeah. And I think that's what that energy and enthusiasm is what then, absolutely spills out. And then people think, oh, I might have a chat about a Farmers Guardian membership. And then you get people onto the stand talking. And I'm grateful to say that, you know, people do part with their money, which getting farmers to spend money is difficult.
Quite hard, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, well, as we sort of drifted into events, you know, one of the findings in the Enders report this morning was that, you know, face-to-face events are something that AI can't really muscle in on, which seems to be, for the time being, a reassuring truth, whether it stays like that. But I'd be interested really in that kind of concept, because clearly, whether it's 365, digi-physical, all of these different terms have been put around it. Media companies with events and content and all of those things happening seem to have an advantage. So, I mean, what would be your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, Attitude wouldn't exist now if I hadn't created the Attitude Awards back in 2012. That's reached such a scale, and it's really set the template for the 2 events that we launched after it. And what it enables us to do is to demonstrate a physical manifestation of who our readers are, how they behave, and the partnerships that come out of those events literally anchor every single piece of the business. So Virgin Atlantic, for example, were the launch sponsor of the Attitude Awards and have been with us now for a 15-year run. And they know that our readers have a propensity to turn left on a plane, so they're there promoting Virgin Atlantic Upper Class. We've had a 10-year relationship with Jaguar, and the marketing campaigns that they then run will focus not only on the live event, but then will also support print and digital and social and generate content year round.
Yeah.
So that manifestation is reassuring to our partners that we're talking to who they think they're talking to. And we live or die by that, really.
So, Andrew, a lot of your clients have kind of, let's say, green room or private events on your platform, don't they? I imagine that's the same kind of concept. I'm interested in how that works on your platform, but also the value of proving that you've got the access, because one of the things with video is you can make videos out of AI, but if you've got a good journalist and a good interviewee, video is proof of the fact you have the access to the people, which is a key thing from an editorial point of view. So could you just maybe expand on that kind of concept a bit?
Well, it starts philosophically. We think of our clients' communities as fan clubs.
Yeah.
And in any traditional fan club, if you're thinking about, say, the music industry, for example, you've got the super fan, the fan, and the relatively, this is going to sound awful, but the deadwood portion of the fan club that don't buy anything, don't listen to anything, and you really wonder why they're there. That dynamic creates a community spirit.
Right.
And what you're really, the ultimate successful definition of a strategy is that you've built a community, so that there is more than a desire to just listen or to watch. There is a desire to engage, and that engagement means community member to community member, or they're getting closer to the brand that they want to be close to.
Yeah.
We have a global rock star client, and we look after his fan club, and it is amazing to see that their goal is really just to get as close to the rock star as possible, and to say, I'm a super fan, I'm in the inner circle. So what we try to do is help our clients understand, is there a super fan community within your audience?
Yeah.
And then how can you turn that into a higher level of engagement and an additional revenue stream, whether it's an event or it's some other type of forum activity.
And particularly with celebrities who are maybe the content themselves, how much work do you need to do with coaching them and helping them sort of develop a style or a presence?
Most of the celebrities that we work with have a quite strong view already. And one of our creative team members is very, very good at working with these celebrities. And she understands far better than I do how to get them to do the right thing in a piece of content. So it's a sort of an act of balanced diplomacy of they've probably already got a good understanding of how their voice already works, but maybe we can nudge them here and there.
Okay. Can we get the QR code up? Because I think with 10 minutes, just under 8 minutes to go, it might be good to get some questions in. If you've got them, I'll keep going until we've got a few. Oh, we've got a few already. Can we put them on the screen down here so I can see them?
Nothing else happening, just to be clear.
Right. As an ex-journalist, I'm kind of quite interested in people that, in old language, have face for radio, I think was the term. How they become presenters, how they become podcasters, how they become data journalists, how they become all of these things. And are you expecting people to do everything, or are you hiring different kinds of people?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? We are expecting a lot from our journalists, aren't we? When I started in the industry 20 years ago, it was, I'd go out on a job, I'd write a news story, it would go in the print edition of the newspaper, and then it would find its way onto the website at some point that week. Now we're expecting our journalists to be the face, the brand. There's 2 points on that. So one, yes, we are hiring people with those specialisms. So we brought on an ITV broadcast journalist to help us with our AV content. And really to spur the team on in terms of presenting and how to take great video and edit it. The other point as well on the journalist being the brand is that credibility piece again. So our newsletter strategy, which we completely overhauled quite recently, so we have various different newsletters, really good open rates, particularly from the journalists who write. Basically, people want to hear from the journalists. They want to hear their opinion, their analysis on the week's events, what's happening in the beef. Beef prices are sky-diddly high at the moment. What are their thoughts on that? And actually then making sure that we just give that real tantalising snapshot of what that opinion might be, and then making people click through back to the website. That's been something that we've really seen success with. And again, you can't read that content without being a member. So I think that's really helped. And it's investing in people who farmers want to hear from, because
and do you find your journalists are, you probably have some journalists saying it's not for me, I imagine, but do you have some journalists who are luckily, experimenting?
No, not at the moment. No. Can I see a point where, we are asking a lot of people, and they literally, we're one of the few B2Bs, I think we are out all the time. If we're not at a trade show or an event or an agricultural show, we're out on a farm. We're literally reporting from the field. So, again, having those skills is just being vital, investing in our people to make sure that they feel confident in their jobs, to carry that out. Because that is, for us, that's the key, because farmers trust that, and they want more of that.
Darren, you mentioned earlier that you had a contributor who is quite a well-known person. I didn't know who they were, but was producing content for you. It immediately makes me think about the goal hanger model, where you've got creators who are kind of co-owning the content with the media company. Is that something you're exploring in your formats?
Yeah, it was an interesting. Well, shortcut's the wrong word. Attitude and Rolling Stone are dependent on relationships with talent and talent management, and so having worked with a number of them on different projects, there was an opportunity, we thought, to inherit an audience and then amplify that audience, and so yes, there's a bit of shared ownership about it, but it works well. They have a pull because they're visible in a face and have an audio audience. We're able to amplify that into places that they otherwise wouldn't go, and so we share costs and revenues, and hopefully it becomes bigger as a result of both of those.
So I think we need to come back and tackle commercial model, because there's a couple of questions on that in a minute. But Andrew, I'd be kind of interested in the analytics side of things, and more importantly, how you measure success. Because if you've got a B2B product, 1,000 listens might be a lot. If you've got a celebrity podcast, 250,000 might be not enough. So how do you measure that?
Well, we don't measure success until the client has first told us what their definition of success is. So that's the starting point.
And is there a common denominator with them, or is it always different?
No, it could be reach, it could be monetization, it could be impact. They have really varying KPIs that they're thinking about. So our business strategy in supporting them is then developed around what are clearly their objectives. I'd say the one thing they do have in common is growth. So growth and engagement are the two tests that come up the most. growth as in the size of the audience, and engagement as in what are they doing with the content. For our clients, we've got over 70% of the audiences listening to more than 28 minutes of content, which is quite significant. And in terms of growth, we did an audit of a client recently where we looked at the last 36 months of working with them, and their audience had grown about 550% in 36 months, and with pretty much every month being a growth rate. So for them, it was all about growth and then turning that into revenue.
So it's probably quite a good idea for publishers to maybe think in that way, that if you've got different audiences and different kinds of content threads, to think about what success you want to
Yes, and
achieve.
it dictates your strategy in terms of, are you putting your podcasts or vodcasts in a very public forum, like a Spotify or an Apple, or are you trying to make it feel more exclusive and premium with a more private approach?
So there's a question here from Alistair Smith. How does the commercial model work on your co-branded podcast? Alistair, do you mean like sponsored podcasts where a client is sponsoring? Could you maybe elaborate on what you mean by that?
I think this has been answered. It was the revenue share that you just...
It's a revenue share, okay. Okay, no worries on that. Where are we up here? How hard is it to convert print journalists? I think we sort of touched on that. I mean, I think the concept there is you don't really necessarily want to lead a horse to water. You want to identify the ones who could do it and then get people in who can't do it. Is that right?
Exactly, but I think, that is definitely the way that it's been going throughout my career. With every year the industry's changing so much, and I think being a journalist now means that you want to get your content out there, and you want your audience, you want to get to your audience, and to do that, if you've got to use different platforms to get to them, then as a journalist,
and more generally, I mean, this is maybe one for you, Darren, but more generally, how would you measure success if you're a content creator? Because there's so many different measures now. It used to be how many people read it, or how many people listened to it, but it's not that simple anymore, is it?
No, it isn't. Scale of audience obviously is important, because if people are engaged in the right way, that develops the relationship between you and the brand and generates you money. So engagement tends to be the measure rather than simply scale. But then in environments like Apple News or YouTube, it's the bottom line, it's the return. It's what we're able to earn out of that.
Okay, well, thank you. We have really pretty much come to the end of the time, I think. We could have gone on quite a long time. We haven't answered all the questions. I hope we've given you something to think about. We have a round of applause for the speakers. Thank you very much.